C'est l'événement aujourd'hui dans Rothen S'enflamme sur RMC. John Textor, l'ancien patron propriétaire de l'Olympique Lyonnais, est donc notre invité, Jérôme.
Bonjour John.
Bonjour.
Bonjour John.
Comment vous allez?
I'm good. Très bien.
Ça va bien. Bon, bienvenue en France de nouveau. Pourquoi vous êtes en France actuellement?
Well, I come to France quite often. I think I might have heard you just referred to me as the former owner of Olympique Lyonnais. Is that correct?
Oui, vous êtes toujours le président de l'Olympique Lyonnais. Alors vous vous considérez toujours comme le patron de l'Olympique Lyonnais aujourd'hui?
Yeah, no, I'm not the president. I am still the owner, but I don't have to come here as much, obviously, for work. I come for fun. I love France. My mother's French. I have many friends here. Certainly, I still love the team and the community of Lyon, and I like to stay connected to France.
C'est intéressant de faire cette précision tout de suite, John Textor, parce que effectivement, il y a eu du changement à Lyon à la fin du mois de juin pour le passage devant la DNCG. Michel Kang a été nommé donc patronne de l'Olympique Lyonnais. Vous nous précisez aujourd'hui que vous êtes toujours le propriétaire via la holding Eagle Football. C'est ce que vous êtes en train de nous dire.
Yeah, so Eagle Football, I think, is a 93 or 94% shareholder of Olympique Lyonnais. I'm the majority owner of Eagle Football. I think probably even 30 days before the DNCG hearing, I knew I was in trouble with the political governance side of French football. Had actually had a late tea with Michelle here in Paris, asked her to consider coming on to be the co-chair at least, because of these problems. So I think we knew that politically, in terms of governance, my sort of fun but often disruptive nature was not good for our relationship with the DNCG, and I had asked her to consider taking this position. Obviously, with the relegation, that really became necessary because the only way we were going to get through the appeal was a change of leadership.
Donc si je comprends bien, le fait d'avoir mis Michel Kang à la tête de l'Olympique Lyonnais, c'était une question de personne pour vous, et vous estimez que vous pouvez encore prendre des décisions aujourd'hui pour l'Olympique Lyonnais. Vous n'êtes pas écarté de la direction sportive et des choix stratégiques qui concernent l'OL.
Well, Michelle is the president of Lyon. She reports to the board of directors of Olympique Lyonnais. The board of directors is answerable to the controlling shareholder, of course. So I don't have to be involved in day-to-day operations, but if anything that sort of gets beyond day-to-day operations is necessary for a decision, obviously that's when the board and the shareholder gets involved.
John, vous suivez les résultats de l'Olympique Lyonnais depuis le début de saison et les bonnes performances de l'OL?
Yeah, I mean, it's bittersweet because I don't think the DNCG decision was a financial action. I think it was a sporting action. And I'd love to talk to you about that today. So I look at the squad. I see a football department that I worked hard to reconstruct. The incredible Mathieu Louis-Jean, the rest of the scouting team, all replaced, rebuilt since Jean-Michel. The coach, obviously the coach, I'd tracked him for many years. Everybody knows I love Portuguese coaches. But this coach in particular had not only done well in Portugal, but also in France itself. So I think it's bittersweet because I think the football department's done an incredible job of putting together a squad with incredible constraints, handcuffs that should not be placed on this team. And, how much better we could be if we could fill in some of those gaps with additional players, the kind of players that we have available to us. Half the team that beat PSG in Los Angeles would kill to be here in Lyon, yet they can't be. Because I think this was a sporting intervention more than a financial intervention.
John, à vous entendre, la DNCG en fait a fait un délit de sale gueule avec vous, parce que moi j'écoute tout ce que vous dites. Vous aviez envie de renforcer l'équipe, d'avoir des meilleurs joueurs encore, pour avoir des ambitions, mais aujourd'hui il y a des décisions qui sont tombées. Donc vous nous expliquez que c'est pas des décisions financières, mais plus des décisions d'hommes avec vous. Est-ce qu'il y a vraiment, c'est le ressenti que vous avez?
No, I don't think character is the issue. I think, maybe who knows what they say in the press, but, reputation is who people think you are. Character is who you really are. I don't think my character has been called into question just because some sports journalists don't know how to read the financial pages. I think the problem I had with, the DNCG in particular, I did not make a mistake to buy Lyon. I love the club. I love the community. It's at the same time true that I made a mistake buying anything from Jean-Michel Aulas. He didn't want to sell. He was forced to sell. The club was insolvent. If you adjust out the money they got from CVC and you look at this just in terms of a core operation, I think they had a bottom line of 139 million euros as a loss in the year ended 2023, over a 44 million euro loss in operating cash flow. So we're in the business of buying financially troubled clubs, insolvent clubs, getting them back to financial sustainability, and also getting them trophies. We've done it in France. Not in France, but we've done it in Brazil. We've done it in England. We did it our first year in Belgium. We took this squad from a relegation stature to Europa League. But, when you step in to a situation, you buy a business from a seller that doesn't really want to sell, who's been forced to sell by his majority shareholder. He begrudgingly takes the money. The thrill of that wears off a bit. And then he sells you control, but he goes on national television just a month later and says he doesn't plan on listening to you. And then ultimately puts you in a position where you have to replace him. Then you have to do the unthinkable. I was chosen among a group of buyers because the sellers thought I was most likely to get along with Jean-Michel. Mm-hmm. Yet he's openly announcing he won't make changes if we ask. So we had to fire him, which is horrible. And I'd say every week since that time, he's worked very hard against us. And he's been in this weird spot where, yes, he loves the club, but he's working very hard against the owner of the club. Not a week went by for 2 or 3 years that I wasn't dealing with some emergency, some challenge from Jean-Michel. So I think I shouldn't have bought anything from Jean-Michel. But I ended up with an obligation to the community to run this club and to fix it. And by June 30th of 2025, all of the changes that you've seen now, the reduction in player salaries, the reduction in expenses, that getting this to financial sustainability, that was done. So we not only got this insolvent club, after 36 years of running it, he delivered to us a club that was not able to stand on its own 2 feet. We were able to get this back to financial sustainability by June 30th and get us back into Europa League. And we hadn't been there for a while. So it wasn't easy, and now it needs to be run by somebody else. But if you look at my relationships with the governing bodies, the Federation, the League, the DNCG, the rest of his friends that were protesting every game over a free loan that wasn't a free loan with Thiago Almada, I think the whole country saw that I was up against something more than just typical challenges.
C'est l'événement dans Rothen S'enflamme. John Textor est notre invité pour sa version des faits. On est en train de parler de Jean-Michel Aulas, à qui vous avez racheté l'Olympique Lyonnais à contre-cœur, c'est ce que vous venez de nous dire. Il n'avait pas envie de vous vendre le club. En quelque sorte, il vous a posé des problèmes durant toutes ces étapes. Mais j'ai l'impression que vous pouvez aller plus loin. Et pour vous, Jean-Michel Aulas, à travers ses différents contacts à la fédération et peut-être même à la DNCG, vous a mis des bâtons dans les roues pour appliquer votre projet, votre stratégie financière pour l'Olympique Lyonnais?
Well, look, as far as Jean-Michel, people forget all of these little moments along the way. And, they look at the very painful moment where we're administratively relegated and you forget all the details. You forget, Jean-Michel going onto Twitter and attacking us on Twitter and waking up the next day and saying he was hacked. You forget the week that he froze all 14 cash accounts of our operation, 42 million, because he had a claim against us that he suggested that we owed him money. So our accounts are frozen. The very first transfer window that I faced was 2023. Now, we just come into the club in December 2022. We put 86 million euros on the balance sheet, which is the amount he said we needed. We put another 21 million because the DNCG asked. We paid down 50 million of debt. Every bank was pulling their loans. They were insolvent. That's the definition of insolvency, when the banks are all calling the loans. We refinanced all of the banks. We put in more money, with Eagle's help and also Michel's help at that time by buying more shares. And so with this incredible risk of the DNCG that was hanging over the club, we helped improve the balance sheet. In our very first transfer window, I'm told I can't buy players. It was a month after we fired Jean-Michel. So never in the history of Olympique Lyonnais had we had a transfer ban at the DNCG. And the year that we have it is the year that so much money came in. So I had a relegation squad to start.
Donc il y avait plus d'exigences de la part de la DNCG parce que ce n'était plus Jean-Michel Aulas à la tête de l'Olympique Lyonnais.
Well, I think Jean-Michel Aulas is able to show up and give the DNCG a projection that says he's going to sell Toko Akambe for 20 million euros, and they believe him, and everybody knows he was never going to get more than 5. So the projections that he brought to the DNCG, I'm sure he'd have no trouble getting through. But in my case, the very start of my tenure in Lyon was under a transfer embargo. So, yeah, I'm fairly upset about the cards we were dealt when we started. 7 points after 14 rounds. Nobody's ever escaped relegation after doing that. Then I get one transfer window, which was the next transfer window. Our multi-club helped, and we become the best team in France for the second half of the season. So if we had the freedom to run our club and to run our business, a business model that is sustainable without such supervision and interference, we'd be in Champions League right now.
John Textor, invité de Rothen S'enflamme sur RMC, c'est l'événement. John, vous vous en doutez, vous devez le ressentir à travers les réseaux sociaux, à travers tout ce qui se passe à Lyon. Il y a une forme de rejet désormais des supporters envers vous. On vous en veut beaucoup. On a cru qu'avec vos actions financières, vous alliez faire disparaître une place forte du football français, l'Olympique Lyonnais, un grand club et qui a marqué l'histoire du football français. Est-ce que vous comprenez la colère des supporters, des salariés également de l'Olympique Lyonnais? Est-ce que vous voulez leur faire passer un message aujourd'hui dans Rothen S'enflamme?
Well, look, you don't worry about what people think of you if you're in this business. You have to show up and do your job. You have to be honest. You have to help. The fact is, we did nothing but help, and it wasn't good enough. We succeeded at bringing significant capital to pay off debts. There's only so much you can do about the profit and loss of a club in France. The operating losses will continue for big clubs like this. They'll just need more and more capital. So, ultimately what we were not able to fix, at the same time we're coming in, we're adding talent, we're trying to reduce expenses, we also have headwinds. We lost an enormous amount of money on television revenues. The profit and loss statement, every single year since I took over, I improved revenues, but the fans don't know that. They don't know that because these one-time injections of capital that came from CVC when we sold the TV rights. Well, that's just booking today money that you took by pledging the future. So when you look at the 2023-24 numbers or the 2022-23 numbers, each one of those included 40 to 50 million of revenues from one-time sales. So if you take all of these financial tricks out of the equation and you look at the revenues, the core operating revenues of Olympique Lyonnais, it's about 250 million that year. The next year under my leadership was about 250. The next year under my leadership was about 270. So I actually increased revenues while television was going down because I made the team better. I got back to Europa League. Every line item that I could influence, we increased. The one I could not increase was television. So what was my mistake in terms of the P&L? Well, it starts in 2023. We had 7 points after 14 rounds. I had a transfer ban that was based on somebody else's numbers, the prior owner, and I had to live with that. Should I allow the team to go into relegation or should I spend more money? Well, as you know, in football, you can't just get rid of players. You can't just stop paying them. They have contracts. So now you have to overlap expense on top of the expense you have. So our salaries ballooned up over the course of that year because we had to avoid relegation, and ultimately it worked better than that. We got to Europa League. So now you move into the next year, and you've got higher match day, you've got higher television revenues, now you have a real opportunity, but then the league blows up its TV deal. We lose $30 million in revenues alone on that, which is almost exactly the amount of revenues we brought in from TV from Europe. So the good news is all those contracts, peel off. Anthony Lopez, Lacazette, who I love, Lovren, all these people, even big bonuses for Tolisso that were paid in those years that we didn't have again. So what I delivered, I would tell the supporters, is expense reductions, which are so significant. And they were all put in place in the spring of 2020, fall of 2024 and the spring of 2025, so that when you get to June 30th, all of those wages come down. We had a 40% reduction in player wages. We had a greater reduction because of the very long developing reduction in workforce. So we delivered to the DNCG in the May meeting, in the June meeting, a financially sustainable business. Well, the supporters don't know that. They just don't know that. All they see is we get relegated. So of course they have hatred. Because what did I say? I said we had enough money to support this business, and we did. If you look at our DNCG presentation, which I'm happy to share with you, not only did we have a sustainable business, we had all the money coming in from Crystal Palace, and we had a friendly lender that would let us keep some of it if we needed it. We had an additional $70 million that we brought in from a group called Rothen Capital, which is a forward player transfer transaction. We had $25 million additional from Aries. We had another $30 million from Michelle. We had more cash shown as optional solutions for any negative cash flow challenges we had. And we had a full green light on May 20th from the DNCG that said, John, you're good. So the supporters can hate me for not being good a month later, but you have to look at what happened between May 20th and June 24th. On May 20th, we have a full green light. We do nothing but improve our numbers that month. We bring $25 million of extra cash. We sell Ryan Cherki for $30. We show up on June 24th. Our numbers much better than they were on May 20th. You'll have to ask the DNCG how we have a full green light on May 20th and suddenly we're relegated on June 24th.
Le discours officiel de la DNCG, John Textor, c'est d'avoir dit on ne peut pas rester sur ses promesses et qu'il y avait eu peu d'avancées entre le 20 mai et la suite fin juin lorsque le club a été rétrogradé en deuxième division. Ce n'était que des promesses, pas d'argent propre et personnel apporté. C'était la version et il trouvait ça effectivement un peu trop juste, un peu trop hypothétique pour pouvoir confirmer et valider le maintien de l'Olympique Lyonnais en Ligue 1. Pourquoi à ce moment-là, vous, ne pas avoir changé votre fusil d'épaule et avoir apporté des fonds propres, des fonds personnels pour sauver le club et sortir de ces promesses d'éventuelles rentrées d'argent de Crystal Palace et de toutes les promesses qu'il y avait à ce moment-là qui n'ont pas convaincu la DNCG. C'est la version du gendarme du football français.
I haven't heard that version. I think that's nonsense. The DNCG historically accepts a certain amount of promises if they come from parties they trust. So when Jean-Michel promises to sell Toko for 20, they trust it, right? I understand that I'm not trusted by the DNCG, so I have a higher bar. But what the DNCG had always given you credit for in the past are contracts, signed contracts. So when the DNCG comes to a club, as they did all clubs, and say, you have to show us you're sustainable with no TV revenues, because we screwed up so bad, we're not going to give you TV revenues, and you can't count player sales, because that's speculative. Well, that hurts a club like Lyon because we're different. We have an academy. We do 80 to 100 million in player sales every year. It's a core part of our business. It's very different than player trading. So now you have to go into that meeting saying, okay, I don't even get to count a significant line item of our business, the third most successful academy in the world. I've got to count that at zero. So what did we do? We had a contract with a group called Rothen Capital. We said, look, we'd like to sell you a percentage of future transfer proceeds across our whole squad because we don't want to be forced to sell a particular player, one that we strategically value in a particular window. Because sometimes you get into a window where they'll pay you $20 million for Malik Fofana. But if you wait till July, they'll give you $40 million. So we brought a contract from a group called Rothen Capital, and they'd put the first $10 million installment in a lawyer account, and we had installments to come through the year, and it was a contract. On May 20th, they liked that contract. On June 24th, red pen, right through it. 70 million goes away. So these are not promises, these are contracts. And as far as other promises, we had a commitment letter from Aries for 25. We had a commitment letter from Michelle Kang for 30. We had a letter from Aries that said, look, we don't need it. We just don't need it. The Crystal Palace money comes in. We have a contract that we're selling it to Woody Johnson. It's $200 million. We think if it makes you comfortable, DNCG, we'll set 40 aside. So if you look at our cash, if you've got an abundance of cash and you never even come close to zero, and you've got contracts, and they suddenly say they don't like your business model, they actually looked at us in the June 24th meeting and they said, there's a typo. This guy's name is Ron Friedman here, but it says Ron Fried here. And they asked me this question in the meeting. I could not have been more flabbergasted by the question. Apparently there's a typo in the document, so they throw it out. They says it's not serious, and they count 70 million as a zero. So I don't care what this public story is. I don't care what this public story is. This public story is bullshit. Okay? Promises, no. Contracts, yes. An abundance of cash, way beyond everybody in this league other than PSG and Marseille and Monaco. I mean, how can you have credible parties like Aries, Michelle Kang, myself, others that are coming with commitment letters in writing? These are not promises. And you're selling Crystal Palace and you're taking whatever you need from that to make sure the club has it, but you don't need it.
La différence exacte,
Yeah.
prenons l'exemple d'un club comme l'Olympique de Marseille et de son propriétaire américain comme vous, Frank McCourt, c'est de l'argent personnel qui est investi.
Tous les ans,
il y a
tous
une
les
trace
ans, il
pour la
remet-
DNCG.
Congratulations.
On
He's
est-
richer than
Non,
I
mais
am.
Est-ce que pour vous,
on n'est pas sur de la spéculation financière, on est sur du concret, des preuves, de l'argent propre apporté directement pour permettre le train de vie de son
Sir,
club.
with all due respect, you're changing the rules. You don't know the rules. You've never presented the DNCG. The DNCG for years accepts promises from friendly French presidents. They accept contracts from others, right? They say we're not going to believe it unless it's in writing. Well,
Et vous, non?
we delivered them commitment letters from credible financial institutions and credible people. And we have a contract to sell Crystal Palace, which brings in $200 million. And we have a letter from the lender that says, as much as you need to reserve from that, we'll make available. But the fact is, we didn't need it. If you look at the cash curves that I'm going to be publishing on my personal website in the next few days, shows that we never came close to anything close to zero. And that's with no TV revenue in our budget and with no assumption of player sales, which, by the way, is the most ridiculous thing in the world. So, Frank McCourt, if you want to publish all over the place that he's richer than me, that's fine. But is that the only business model that works in French football, that you have a single patriarch who just writes a check no matter how stupid it is? That's
No.
not our business model, and I never made that promise. But how is it, and please get back to this, right? Because I know you're here to press me. How is it that we got a full green light on May 20th, and they said, we're pleasantly surprised by your numbers. The numbers only get better between then and June 24th, but June 24th, you're relegated.
Mais
Answer, please. I'm asking you the question. Should that be possible?
Non, mais-
And if it happens, should the community of Lyon deserve a little bit of warning? You may not like John Textor because he wore the cowboy hat and everybody thought that was funny. They didn't think it was funny, right? An American shows up to start changing television, changing government.
mais John, pourquoi
How does that work?
pourquoi vous
You
avez-
might not like John Textor, but the community of Lyon deserves more
Mais-
Non
than
mais
a
John,
surprise
pourquoi
relegation.
Pourquoi vous avez mis 6 mois donc pour expliquer cette version des faits déjà? Et puis l'autre question que j'ai, parce que vous êtes venu, c'est la deuxième fois que vous venez dans
Why?
Rothen
You know
S'enflamme.
why?
C'est la deuxième fois que vous venez dans mon émission, et 6 mois avant donc que vous partiez de Lyon, vous nous avez dit ici même que l'objectif de Lyon c'était de faire la Ligue des Champions. C'est pour ça que vous changiez Pierre Sage par Fonseca, et que c'était primordial pour le club et aussi financièrement de faire la Ligue des Champions en fin d'année. Ça allait rassurer tout le monde. Donc déjà on savait que au mois de janvier, donc 6 mois avant votre départ l'année dernière, que c'était compliqué. Et là aujourd'hui vous nous dites que en fait financièrement tout allait bien, que le club était en train de s'enrichir et que tout allait se passer bien. Moi en fait il y a quelque chose qui m'échappe là-dedans.
Well, one, I never said the club was doing well. Every big French club with no TV, with look, French clubs have complicated economics. I never said the club's doing well. What I said was the club was insolvent when I took it over. I've increased revenues every year since I've been here, even delivering it to Michelle. We reduced expenses that were effective as of June 30th, where the profit and loss would be sustainable. I delivered that while we also took a relegation squad up to Europa League. That's what I said. As far as why I haven't told my story till now, because you know what? I don't really care about my reputation in France. I care about the club. I've had to sit here and look at all these articles saying that I left, there were financial irregularities. No irregularities. Nobody's come out with a single credible story that said anything other than we funded and funded and funded money in this club.
Ce que je ne comprends pas dans votre discours.
To finish your question,
Yes.
I waited until today because I wanted to make sure the club was okay. The club got through the DNCG. They've gone from having a recruitment ban to having salary measures. Do I think they should have it? No. I think that they should trust Michelle Kang to run that business a lot more than they should trust themselves. It's a panel of 18 volunteers. I don't know where they come from. They're auditors. They're financial consultants. She's an expert. She knows how to run a business. Why do you need to tell her what to spend? I think that's nonsense. So why did I wait? Because me talking is only going to irritate people even more, which is only going to hurt the club. So as the owner, let her run it, right? But when I see articles like I saw last week that say we had phantom player transfers, I want to talk about sporting here today. Because you talk about my promises. I promised that we were going to bring money to get the club back to sustainability, and we did. I promised that my shareholders would back this club if they were challenged, and they did. And the exact numbers that we put forth in May 20th meeting and the June 24th meeting are dramatically similar to the $100 million that ultimately came in by the time there was the appeal.
Oui, mais John, l'équipe sportivement s'est affaiblie. On est d'accord avec ça.
Well, I don't know when you're talking about, but let's go back to the fall of 2024. Let's talk about the phantom transfers. You have to understand that when you're competing for talent down in South America, you have to compete for that talent at the end of their natural season, which ends in December.
Est-ce que, John, je peux juste préciser ce que...
I keep trying to get to sporting and you keep interrupting me.
De quoi on parle lorsqu'on parle de transfert fantôme? On parle juste de transfert donc de 5 joueurs qui étaient à Botafogo, qui ont généré une créance de 120 millions d'euros pour l'Olympique Lyonnais, et 4 d'entre eux n'ont jamais joué sous le maillot lyonnais. L'exception, c'est Thiago Almada. Les autres n'ont jamais porté le maillot de l'Olympique Lyonnais.
Okay. Well, yeah, I keep trying to get there. First of all, I don't even know what a phantom transfer is. Those players were recruited. I want to focus on the big three first. Thiago Almada, when he was recruited into Eagle football, had an agreement that he could play for Botafogo and that he could transfer to OL. That's the wonderful way that we as a multi-club, whether you like it or not, we get to recruit people into player pathways. If you don't like multi-clubs, change the rules of the league, but this is all okay with the rules. So Thiago won us, 2 championships down in Brazil. In his contract, he had the right to come to Lyon. We had no transfer ban, no sanctions. At that moment in 2024, as the season was ending, and we signed a contract to transfer his rights to Lyon, and he signed a player services agreement, and he's coming to Lyon. It's not a phantom transfer, it's a football transfer.
Et les autres?
At the same time, Igor Jesus also recruited into Eagle football based on the pathways we can provide to Europe. We got him as a free transfer. He had an incredible scoring record in the Emirates. People maybe were concerned about the level. Maybe they were concerned about past injuries. We take him down to Brazil. He becomes a starting striker for the Brazil national team. Obviously, you saw him in the game against PSG. I think everybody saw him score again the other night at Nottingham Forest. Top player. He signs a deal in the fall of 2024 that he's going to come at the end of his season to OL. Luis Henrique, voted best player in Brazil, voted best player in South America, also did well for us in Copa Libertadores. He signs a deal. His original deal signed in January 2024 had Olympique Lyonnais and Botafogo on the contract, and he could decide which window he would choose to come after doing well in Brazil. These are real football transactions and transfers that were signed by the athletes with personal services agreements waiting for the window for them to transfer.
Et pourquoi on ne les a jamais vus sous le maillot lyonnais alors?
This is a wonderful question for the DNCG. Because if the DNCG, this is very important. And the only reason I'm talking about this is I continue to hope for change, right? I continue to be that guy that wants to see change. But if you're the DNCG and we've empowered them to care about us financially, to protect us from ourselves, to make sure we don't spend too much money, how do you tell us that we can't afford to put on the roster 3 players that we already owned? They were in our system. We have cash pooling across all of our clubs. We already paid for them. They were already rostered for us in Brazil. So they come to France, and we're under no transfer ban at the time we sign them. And we have to sign them at that point because that's the end of their natural season. And if you're competing for Endrick at Real Madrid or Estevao at Chelsea, if you're not signing them down in South America between the windows, you don't get them. So we sign them. We can afford them. We already own them. We're just doing transfer pricing between the clubs, right pocket to left pocket. And what do they say? You cannot roster them. So hang on. The DNCG is supposed to care about your money. They're not going to let you put on the field players that you already own, that you clearly can afford. And what does that do? That creates more risk. Because what if you break that contract with a player? What does he get to do? You're a former player. Player gets to break the contract, and now you lose all the asset value. So we said to the DNCG, yeah, you may think we have a transfer problem going forward. Well, give us a forward-looking transfer ban. But a retroactive transfer ban where we can't put them on the field, we all know why. We saw it when J.P. Calio and all these other presidents start protesting reserves every game of Thiago Almada. They knew these players were coming. I would ask you, I'm quite sure everybody knew they were coming. And how good would our roster have looked if they had allowed players that we already bought, the best players coming out of Brazil, to be on that roster starting in January? You saw how good Thiago Almada was. What if he was there with Igor Jesus and Luis Enrique? We would have been in Champions League, I would submit.
Mais John Textor, on peut comprendre l'éventuelle jalousie des autres clubs de Ligue 1. On se rappelle tous des réserves posées par différents clubs lorsque Thiago Almada allait jouer à Reims, peu importe, dans les autres clubs de France. Ce que j'ai du mal à comprendre avec votre discours, c'est que vous nous dites que vous aviez tous les feux au vert le 20 mai, tout a changé à la fin du mois de juin.
24 juin, oui.
Quel est l'intérêt de la DNCG d'aller mettre en danger un des monuments du foot français, l'un des plus grands clubs de foot en France? Quel est l'objectif de la DNCG? Pourquoi aurait-il envie comme ça de faire couler l'Olympique Lyonnais?
I don't think it was ever in danger of relegation. I think they wanted a leadership change. So if you look at the budget that Michel is taking in front of the DNCG yesterday, it is probably almost exactly what my revenue budget was in June of 2024. It is almost exactly what my player budget was because those expense reductions were already put in place by the rolling off of the contracts. It's almost exactly what the operating expenses were because of the reduction in workforce that was long planned. I would bet the only difference might be because you changed the mix of players you sell. You could have different amortization because of the carried cost of players. So what's different about the budget that just got her through the DNCG yesterday and the one that I took in front of them? The difference is the leader. They wanted a change in leadership. Yep. I think the Cowboy Act was funny for some, not for them. But I don't want to lose this point. If the DNCG was about protecting the financial health of the clubs, how can you put us at risk of violating all those agreements such that Thiago, Igor, and Luis Enrique could have broken their contracts and we would have lost full asset value? How can you say that you can't afford to put them on the roster when you already own them? They didn't want those players on that roster. Other presidents didn't want them on the roster. You tell me why the DNCG tells us we can't afford players we already own. So I'm not going to... Why am I talking now? Because there's an article that talks about real young men that signed contracts that really wanted to play for Lyon and help this team win, and the DNCG decided you cannot roster them. That's legislating football. That's not protecting us financially.
John, à vous entendre, il y a beaucoup de regrets. Donc peut-être que vous avez envie de revenir à la tête de Lyon.
First of all, love the question because you got to do your job. But you don't hear regrets. You hear upset. I'm upset because the story that this was about financial sustainability when I improved revenues, core revenues, every year since I've been here. You have to carve out the CVC money. You have to carve out the one-time license of the women's team to Michelle and how that revenue was all stacked into 1 year. You have to carve away the one-time gain of the sale of the stadium, which, by the way, was in debt. 90 million of off-balance sheet debt that didn't show on the balance sheet that I was able to get rid of. You have to carve those away and look at the core revenues, and core revenues went up every year I was here, even with the reduction in domestic television. And in terms of expenses, the only time I blew up the P&L was when I had to overlap additional players on top of that relegation summer of 2023 to make sure we didn't go down. So here we are now, as of June 30th, 2025, when we start the new year, and the 40% reduction's in place, the expense reduction in workforce is in place, even with reduced TV, now that we're in Europa League, because we got there, we're a sustainable P&L. We didn't need help. We didn't need the DNCG.
John, alors pas de regret.
So I'm upset about it because I believe it was about sporting. Because you cannot explain to me why those three players did not come.
John, pas de regret, ok, vous êtes en colère, donc votre objectif ultime, c'est peut-être de revenir alors à la tête de Lyon.
No. It's just one of those provocative questions that you're supposed to throw out there. Michelle's
non, c'est pas provoque du tout.
Who says I want to come back?
Mais non, mais je sais pas au fond de vous, vu que c'est.
Is there anything I said
John,
today
c'est une question
that I want to come back?
C'est une question légitime parce qu'à vous entendre depuis le début, moi j'écoute et merci de vous livrer comme ça. Mais j'ai quand même l'impression que c'est un délit de sale gueule. Donc on voulait vous évincer et mettre une autre tête à la tête de Lyon. Mais au fond de vous, vu que vous avez fait beaucoup de bonnes choses, peut-être que vous avez envie de revenir, c'est tout.
Look, I don't know what I said today that would give you that impression. I appreciate the question. I really enjoy Brazil. I told you, even 30 days before the DNCG hearing, the first hearing, I sat with Michelle and said, Michelle, you might want to come into this. It became even more obvious when the relegation happened. But look, you haven't seen me around. I'm not out talking about it.
No.
I'm talking about it now, one, because the club is safe, and two, I think it was a tipping point for me to read this nonsense about phantom players. Because the Lyon fans, and I'm talking to them, you can be upset with me because I was so provocative, such a disruptor. I irritated too many people in French football. That's where my mistakes lie. But don't come to me and tell me that player transfers were not good for the club. Those were player purchases. And they have liabilities associated with the installment payments that relate to those purchases. But as those players were sold, Olympique Lyon got every single euro of cash associated with the ownership of those players. And to date, Botafogo has sent 146 million euros of cash to OL. OL has sent 40 million back. There's 104 net cash that was sent from the Eagle Network to help OL. In addition to the money that we put in when we bought it, we've done nothing but financially support the club.
John Textor.
So I have no interest in coming back to the politics of French football. Michel is much better at it, and the club is in much better shape as a result of it.
Au-delà de la forme, ce qu'on vous reproche aussi à Lyon, c'est d'avoir détruit en quelques années ce qui avait été construit en plusieurs décennies. Je pense notamment au centre de formation, à tout ce qui a été vendu. Je pense à l'Arena aussi qui a été cédé. C'était pourtant un fonds comme ça.
À Jean-Michel Aulas.
À Jean-Michel Aulas d'ailleurs, un fonds immobilier qui aurait pu rapporter de l'argent à Lyon.
Let's do it one by one.
La section féminine aussi.
No offense, but this is a bit like a tabloid show. All you're doing is repeating rumors. So why don't you ask me a specific question?
Non, mais vous allez vous expliquer, allez-y.
On fait juste notre travail de journaliste parce que...
Allez-y, on vous écoute.
I don't read the press over here.
Mais c'est notre rôle de vous mettre devant vos contradictions.
You're not doing your job.
C'est
What
votre
you're doing is
discours.
you're asking about rumors. Ask a specific question of something that I might have destroyed because to...
Est-ce que l'Arena a été vendue? Pourquoi avoir vendu l'Arena lorsque vous étiez propriétaire de l'Olympique Lyonnais, par exemple?
First of all, it was already sold. It was not on the balance sheet. It was being built under a financing contract called a sale leaseback. It's where the owner of a property sells it to a third-party financial institution, and he agrees to pay rent. So that decision was already made before I arrived. It's a sale leaseback. As we show up, the budget from the money that came in on the sale leaseback is being used to build it. At completion, we then operate it. We have to pay rent on it. Now, a sale leaseback is typically a sale and an agreement to rent it back. This contract, in my opinion, was deceptively booked in our financials because there was a provision in the contract that required us at the very end to pay it all back. So that $90 million obligation did not show on the balance sheet, but that $90 million obligation was debt, 90 million euros. So I had an arena that is a 90 million euro debt through the contract. I owe it back. It's not on the balance sheet. People don't think it's there, but it's there. And the first few shows start to happen, and it's pretty clear that we grossly underestimated the cost of running a show. And ticket sales come in, the costs come in, looks like we're going to be considerably less profitable. I calculate the yield that I think we're going to get off the stadium, and I look at that 90 million in debt. I'm like, you know what? I don't want to be in the arena business. I want to be in the football business. We sell it to a very proud guy who built it.
Alors pourquoi avoir vendu la section féminine qui
Okay,
fait partie
well, no, let's get back to the arena. Did I destroy the arena? Because the arena seems to be doing a pretty good job of entertaining people in Lyon, right? It's there. I didn't destroy the arena. I sold it. And what I did was I brought in cash and I got rid of debt. And that cash helps fund the fact that the club I inherited was losing over 120 million euros a year, right? This was an insolvent club that was losing over 120 million euros a year, 44 at least at the operating cash flow line. And I had to sell off assets to make sure we could cover that. And the arena is there. The town is loving it. Jean-Michel owns it. So I don't think I destroyed the arena. I think it's a beautiful place.
John, quand vous avez acheté le club à Jean-Michel Aulas, vous étiez au courant de tout ça, que ce club était insolvable?
Of course.
Oui.
Yeah.
Donc vous saviez que vous auriez ces décisions-là.
My job is to clean it up.
Ouais.
Botafogo was bankrupt in the second division 3 years ago, and now it's not this year, but last year, top of South America.
Pour parler de Lyon, vous saviez donc, quand vous avez acheté le club, que de toute façon, il fallait vendre l'aréna, il fallait vendre la section féminine. La section féminine aussi, vous avez vendu.
No, let's talk about those individually. I did not know I would need to sell the arena. I got concerned about it because I wasn't sure the numbers were going to pull. And we also made a deal that I don't think was fairly handled. We made a deal to sell to Jean-Michel. He would do the small shows. We would do the big shows in the stadium. A year later, suddenly Lady Gaga is a small show and she's booked into the arena. Dua Lipa, another small show, she's booked into the arena. Our revenues at the stadium go down massively because now Jean-Michel is competing with us. In fact, I think our prior CEO actually gave him the contract to go book the acts, and that's how Lady Gaga becomes a small show, right? So it wasn't a mistake to sell it. It was a mistake to let Jean-Michel manage the bookings of both the stadium and the arena because otherwise the stadium would have been booking Lady Gaga. I think she can fill a stadium, last I checked. The arena, I'm happy that we sold the arena. It was 90 million of debt. I wasn't sure it was going to be profitable. If it ends up being profitable for him, congratulations. In terms of OL Femme, again, OL Femme was losing 15.6 million euros a year. Everybody's proud of the team. We all know money in football. You can pay for championships by recruiting the top athletes in the world, and Olympique Lyonnais became the very best in the world. It was the best in the world because we had the highest salaries, we had the best recruiting, we ultimately had the best female players, and we won everything. At 15.6 million euros a year and a loss, we were buying championships, right? So do I want to be in that business? Michelle Kang wanted to be in that business. She was already in women's football. She wanted to turn that into a rational, profitable business, and that was the basis by which she invested money in Eagle. I think that was a good deal for the company, and it's also a good deal for the community. So I think this logic of, boy, you destroyed this and destroyed that. I mean, the arena's still there. It's fabulous. Go watch Ed Sheeran any day. The women's team, if you like OLFM, you get to go watch them. But I had an organization that was losing money on the arena, on the team in Seattle, on the women's team in France, and I wanted to pair those off. Now look at the P&L that I turned over. I turned over a P&L that by June 30th was sustainable, right? I mean, the only loss on a cash basis below EBITDA would be the interest on the stadium. And you can make up for that with player sales if you do a good job globally. We've made, as an organization, 260 million euros in profit on player trading and player arbitrage, taking players from a lower cost market to the European market since April of 2023. 260 million euros of profit since April 2023 when I took over. So what does that mean? That means if you have a club with operating losses that are never going to turn around, like a club in France in particular, this player arbitrage, this global footprint of talent identification, this player migration is the way that you can become profitable. I don't know how you can be profitable as a standalone French club. I'm not that smart because when the TV is coming down and the match day is not enough and the expense of running a squad for Europe is too high, I don't have that solution. I had it through a multi-club. Now, as a business, Eagle, going forward 12 months from today, we're cash positive.
Avec toute votre expérience, désormais, on parlera de votre avenir dans un instant, encore au-delà de l'Olympique Lyonnais, parce qu'on a bien compris que votre but, c'était pas de revenir à la tête de l'OL. Quel est votre regard sur le football français que vous vouliez réformer il y a quelques mois? On se souvient des réunions un peu tendues et
un peu houleuses
et voilà et particulières avec Nasser Al-Khelaïfi notamment. Comment vous voyez le football français? Est-ce que vous êtes inquiet pour le football français avec toutes les problématiques financières, notamment l'absence de droits télé pour les prochaines années?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously I'm concerned about it. I'm still the majority owner of this organization and this club. Television, really the biggest problem. I don't even like the old television deal. I thought the level of revenues weren't enough. I think French football is appealing. It's attractive to the world. We have the best team in the world, PSG, that impresses everybody. So why is our international television revenue so low? Why do we not have a domestic deal that anybody cares about? I'm the only owner that came to French football where his wealth was built through the streaming of football matches on television. That's what my company was, Fubo. Sounds a lot like football, right? Why I couldn't have more influence or be a greater part of the discussion about what the next platform should be, that's up to the league. When they ultimately brought in a person to sort of really take this seriously, it was really a legacy television guy. I thought we should have gone full platform, full eyeballs, maximize the distribution of our content around the world, and whether people pay for it in micro subscriptions or in advertising, the millions and millions and millions of people that you can ultimately reach through new platforms is going to dwarf the revenue that we're going to get through legacy broadcasting. So, yeah, I mean, the problem is, again, I'm sorry, guys, but I'm an American reformist. I'm a disruptor. You can't show up in France and tell people what to do and expect to be treated well. I would do TV differently. I would not have a DNCG. I would have PSR, straight accounting rules. You know, why do we have a volunteer group of people that look at your business model and decide, oh, we don't think you should be doing it that way. We're going to relegate you. So, look, it's just not for me. You know, France is for me. I love it. I come to Paris all the time. Lyon, I love Lyon. I want to go back when it's safe, right? But it's...
Vous adorez Lyon, vous adorez Paris.
What's that?
Vous y êtes souvent.
Look, I don't know. I think the PSG fans like me more than the Lyon fans.
Ça s'est apaisé avec, avec Nasser Al-Khelaïfi ou pas?
Est-ce qu'il est réconcilié avec le cow-boy, Nasser Al-Khelaïfi?
Yeah, no, Nasser, look, everybody knows. They've seen us together. We spent time together. He's got a great sense of humor. You know, we get very serious in the call where he called me the cowboy. Everybody made fun of that. But, in the end, I think he was very helpful to me. You know, we had issues with the UEFA that he helped solve. A lot of people don't know this. I would say we're on very good, friendly terms. I like him a lot. You know, I know it's more fun for people to see us sort of battling, you know, net result at the end of our relationship. He was far more helpful to me in dealing with some of these problems in France than he was ever harmful.
Et pour revenir sur les droits TV, les conseils que vous pouviez donner et qui n'ont pas été entendus, est-ce que pour vous, la chaîne de la Ligue 1 qui a été créée au mois de juillet, c'est un échec?
Well, I don't watch it that way. I live in the U.S., so I watch it differently. So as a consumer, I wouldn't know.
Mais l'idée du modèle, la chaîne où on part de zéro, ça ne rapporte rien au club et il faut attendre un certain nombre d'abonnés pour que ça devienne rentable et qu'il y ait des rentrées d'argent pour les clubs de Ligue 1
c'est
et
plus
Ligue
le
2.
modèle, ouais.
Well, I mean, new platforms take a while. You know, people have to adjust to, you know, different practices of viewership. I don't think there's really going to be much money to be drawn out of France to begin with. You know, there's no, you know, we're supposed to be a globally powerful league, like England, like Germany, like Italy, right? I mean, international is where we're supposed to be. And France is a beautiful content story. Everybody loves not only the Eiffel Tower and the big, glorious, glamorous city of Paris, but all the villages and the different subcultures of France. I mean, this is the content that we should be pushing out, and we're not. Our international revenues are pathetic. So the league, the guys that broke French football are still running French football, right? And then you have an increasingly powerful guy that runs the DNCG that gets to, you know, set rules of his own, not just financial rules, but sporting rules. Never seen that before, right? The financial body is also legislating sporting decisions and telling you who you can roster, even when you already own them for free. I'd like that to be the takeaway of this meeting. You can be upset at everything else I said, but the fans at Lyon should wonder, why didn't all those players end up on the roster if we already owned them? Right? But as far as the future of French football, I'm just going to watch it. I enjoy watching it. Some of the greatest players in the world. Economically, you know,
est-ce que vous en voulez à Vincent Labrune, le président de la Ligue de football professionnel, et comment vous analysez, vous, son travail, sachant que vous avez été acteur majeur pendant des années?
Je crois qu'il l'a dit à demi-mot.
No, last I saw him, it was at the Manchester United game where we had that horrible result, you know, nearly winning the quarterfinal Europa League. I was with Vincent. I was with his son. His son is gorgeous, you know, polite, funny. You know, I had a great time with him. I don't have any problem with Vincent. You know, where he stands on me or what he may have been involved in or not involved in, I have no idea. I'm just saying generally, I do think the model's still broken. I think the only way that you can, you know, do well here in France is if you have infinite wealth or you've got some kind of a player sales model, or you just agree to be mid-table and lower, you know, for the rest of time. But there is no economic model of French football that works, and so leadership has got to be accountable to that. And the guys that broke it are still running it.
John, deux dernières questions. Déjà la première pour parler des acteurs. Vous nous avez parlé de Cherki tout à l'heure, qui est parti à Manchester City, que vous avez transféré à Manchester City. Je sais que vous avez une relation spéciale avec Cherki. Déjà, qu'est-ce que, en regardant comme ça, son évolution, ça doit vous faire plaisir. En plus, il va certainement participer à la Coupe du Monde aux États-Unis.
Yeah, I mean, I think he should have been on the national team much sooner. I think it took him way too long to get on.
Ça a augmenté sa valeur.
Il est jeune, hein, Cherki, quand même, hein, John.
Vous l'auriez vendu plus cher s'il avait été international plus tôt.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, there were promises made to him that he could leave early. Those promises were brought to my desk. Same with Barcola and Lukeba and some others. Cherki was going to go to PSG for $15 million. There was, you know, a very unusual part of the contract. There wasn't a true release clause, but it did sort of provide him some latitude to move on. Ultimately, if he were entirely our athlete without any of those complications, we would have gotten more for him. But to get 30 plus for an athlete that had a release clause at considerably less than that, I think financially we did as well as we could. I think when a Lyon Academy player moves on to be so good at a higher level, obviously it brings value back to Lyon and the Academy for the future. So I think we just need to be proud of how well he's doing. I mean, he's just a human highlight film we all watch. He happens to be playing for my favorite team growing up, which is Manchester City, so I'm not entirely upset about that. Look, we got 45 plus 5 for Barcola when everybody had him in the budget to go for 30. We bought Jake O'Brien for $1 million, sold him for 16. We got Lucas Perry for $1 million, sold him for 16. We've got arbitrage and profit all over the system. Sometimes you look smart, sometimes you look like an idiot, but if you do your job, it pretty much averages out.
John, l'année se termine avec la Coupe du Monde aux États-Unis. On ne peut pas vous laisser partir sans parler de la Coupe du Monde aux États-Unis. Pour vous, l'Américain que vous êtes, est-ce que vous sentez une excitation particulière avec cette Coupe du Monde? Est-ce que vous-même, vous êtes excité de voir cette Coupe du Monde aux États-Unis?
Look, I watch football. Like people see me show up at like a Charlton athletic game and wonder what the hell I'm doing there. Like if I'm in a city and there's a football game on, I just go. I don't care if it's a U15 or if it's a pro team. So I'm excited that they're coming. I'm really disappointed in the American public from the Club World Cup. I thought that was one of the most spectacular events. In some ways, more interesting to me. I mean, there's the nationalist pride of the World Cup, which is huge, and it's got tons of history. But the Club World Cup allows you to see a squad that practices together all the time. And you get to see a level tested between one country and one league against another country and another league. And it was quite remarkable, especially as a fan of South American talent, to see how well the teams from Brazil did. I thought that was a more interesting event in some respects, and the American public could hardly wake up to go see a PSG game. Like, you know, I'd love to see the Club World Cup happen every couple of years. I think people will finally get it. I don't know that the U.S. really gets it. I don't know what's going to happen in the actual World Cup. I mean, I think the people that are going to be filling those stadiums, they'll be full, but they're all going to be flying in for it. I don't think it's going to be Americans. You know, Donald Trump's making a big deal out of FIFA, but, you know, I don't think he's going to fill seats.
Vous, John, l'homme d'affaires américain, qu'est-ce que vous pensez de l'innovation mise en place par la FIFA? Officiellement, des pauses hydratation lors de chaque mi-temps. Officieusement, l'envie de vendre de la publicité en pleine rencontre. Donc, une pub en première mi-temps, une autre en deuxième mi-temps. Est-ce que c'est formidable d'un point de vue marketing ou est-ce que c'est dommage pour le consommateur?
Well, I don't know. I honestly don't know how they're going to be doing it. I mean, are they going to be doing it picture in picture with ads? Are they going to be doing it as they're not going to do breaks? But I don't know. Look, I think digital allows you to do a lot with digital insertions. You can have banners and everything that look different on TV than they actually look in the stadium, which means you're allowed to personalize content and advertising to the viewer around the world. I think these things can dramatically increase revenues without taking away from the viewing experience. The camera can just be on the football. If you are going to go to commercial breaks, I mean, they do this in Brazil. They go to a split screen. You know, this same ad, I wish they'd find more advertisers because it's the same ad and the same woman. She's kicking a soccer ball and it has something to do with banking. And I'm not sure, but at least I get to see half the screen for a couple of seconds, just be the football match. So I don't know how they're doing it. They do have to bring more revenue into football because we're certainly not bringing enough revenue to football to have all the clubs of the world sustainable.
La crainte qu'on a en Europe et ici en France plus particulièrement, c'est de voir un président américain, Donald Trump, beaucoup trop interventionniste, le voir partout sur cette Coupe du Monde, prendre des décisions à la place de la FIFA et de Gianni Infantino. Est-ce que vous pensez que ça peut arriver de voir Donald Trump comme ça intervenir sur n'importe quel sujet qui concernera la Coupe du Monde?
I don't pay that much attention to Donald Trump. I am in a very small building in Palm Beach County. His two sons, Donald Jr. and Eric Trump, just moved into my building. I have Secret Service trucks like blocking my parking space that I've got the little Eagle football sign on it and they still park there. So that's my issue with Donald Trump is his kids and taking my parking spaces. I see all the coverage, this bromance that he has with Infantino. I like Infantino. I met him. I don't know what's going on with Trump and him. It seems to be a publicity event. You would know much more what that is in substance. I don't. I'm just worried about my parking spaces.
John, la dernière question, vraiment, c'est la dernière, c'est plus sur votre actu dans le football, c'est quoi? Qu'est-ce que vous voulez faire dans le futur dans le football, c'est-à-dire vous consacrer et vous concentrer sur Botafogo ou peut-être devenir un élément, un personnage un peu plus important dans le monde du foot? Président de la FIFA, par exemple, ou autre chose?
No, you're talking about personal goals. Like, if somebody's either a big character or a small character, just by the nature of their personality, I did not expect to become such a lightning rod in a public way in France. Sometimes you open your mouth,
réussi.
you get in an argument on a call between owners, and somebody calls you a cowboy, and the next thing you know, you're bigger than life. So, I would say, look, I did this in retirement. I made money in technology. I got into football because I loved it. I had a time in my life where I was between jobs and couldn't find a job, and I started an academy back in the year 2005, and I ran that successfully for a bunch of years. I helped get a lot of kids into college and university, and so then when I made money and all of my fake friends came back and said, "Oh, John, you've got money again." For me, I wanted to expand this sort of academy concept. Every one of the clubs that I got involved in was an academy opportunity. Lyon, obviously, being the most obvious. Crystal Palace, 20% of the athletes in the Premier League come out of South London. That was an academy project. So, and every one of these was a fixer-upper, a fix-it project. At Crystal Palace, our capital came in, paid off their COVID debt, finished the academy. Everybody knows my relationship with Oliver Glasner started, here in Lyon. Tried to bring him to Lyon in that very difficult first year. He ended up at Crystal Palace doing quite well. We won an FA Cup, first trophy in 120 years there, 130. Down in Brazil, from bankrupt to champions of Brazil, South America, and best year in 120 years there. Lyon didn't work out as well, but from relegation, I don't think anybody's ever survived relegation after 7 points in 14 rounds, and now we're all enjoying games in the Europa League. So I hope there's at least one or two fans down at Lyon that will not just believe all the headlines and will do the math, that we put a lot more money into that club than people understand, that revenues are up and expenses are reined in, and we're now enjoying Europe again. So that's... Yeah, what do I want to do next? I'd like OL to be healthy. I'd like it to be allowed to be more collaborative with the other Eagle clubs, because I think it's just ridiculous that the DNCG gets involved in sporting decisions. I'd like to have a UK club. We were really required to sell Crystal Palace under weird circumstances, and I think having a UK club in the second division, we have an abundance of talent. I think we can get anybody promoted. I think I can bring trophies anywhere, and I'd like to fight for that in the UK and sort of complete the multi-club picture, and then go to my island and watch football games.
Et vous nous confirmez, parce que c'était au début de l'entretien pour ceux qui l'ont raté, que c'est bien Michel Kang, la propriétaire de l'Olympique Lyonnais, mais que vous restez le patron et vous avez toujours un droit de regard sur l'OL.
Well, I don't know how to interpret the word proprietor. The owner is Eagle Football. She is a small but important shareholder at Eagle. She's running Lyon. She's going to do a whole lot better with the relationships here. She already has than I did. She puts in the time. She builds on those relationships. She was doing that for the feminine side. She was in Paris a lot. She was in Lyon a lot. She, had an interest in doing that when I didn't. She's better at it. But look, I think we're all going to start seeing numbers over the next few weeks, as I'll share more about what the actual DNCG presentations were. I don't see a difference between the budget that I brought in May and June of 2024 and the budget we have today. And one guy gets relegated and the next leader gets promoted right back. I think it's pretty clear. But again, if there wasn't something wrong with this DNCG equation, why were players that were free to us not able to play for us? And why was the community of Lyon put through all this mess? And I guess I'd like to leave you with this. Given the fact that we were given such a clear green light on May 20th, And given that my phone is loaded up with messages with Jean-Marc Mickler that were very friendly and helpful between May 20th and June 24th,
Ouais.
that he was actually intervening to say, hey, John, you have a problem with UEFA given the situation of Lyon and Crystal Palace. You know, you might want to send some cash in. You might want to improve the file. And then we sent 25 million euros in, and then we sold Ryan Cherki. And I've got this nice, friendly relationship with Jean-Marc Mickler, who's giving me a heads up that there might be a problem at UEFA. Well, wouldn't he have given us a heads up that in a couple days after these wonderful text messages, we were about to get relegated? And for the egos of a few men, they were going to put the community of Lyon through the most incredible heartache and hardship. And I don't care about the hashtag Textor out stuff. As I said, you don't get into football if you've got thin skin and you're worried about your reputation. What I care about is when the head of the DNCG later says, oh, well, they needed electroshock therapy. Really? Is that his call? I mean, the community of Lyon needed to be put through electroshock therapy just because they needed to send a message to John Textor. So hate on me all you want. I think the community of Lyon deserves better from the leadership of French football. We're not Bordeaux. We're loaded up with wealthy shareholders. He could have sent me a text message and said, John, there's a problem. That's 70 million from Hutton Capital. We're going to put a red line through it. The 13 million euros per month that comes in from Eagle, we're going to put a red line through that. We're just going to say all of your contracts are worthless, and that green light you got on May 20th is now going to turn into the most incredibly horrid experience for a French community that we've seen since Bordeaux. And instead, I'm getting a bunch of little friendly text messages that don't give me any warning. If you're not going to give me the warning, give the warning to the community of Lyon. Because you know what would have happened? If I went to Aries, or I went to Michelle, or even my own bank account, and said, you know what? They're going to relegate us unless we show up with something different by June 24th. Everybody would have put the money in. And guess what they did? They put it in. They got promoted right back.
Préparer, bien sûr.
So should the system work this way? I mean, guys, like, I get it. You root for other clubs, whatever. I'm the American. Go away. It's fine. But do you really like this system, the DNCG? Or should it be straight accounting, straight PSR, same rules for everybody, not this star chamber of volunteers that decide whether or not they like you?
John, merci beaucoup. En tout cas, c'était très sympa. Et vous n'avez pas voulu répondre à la question de Benoît, savoir si vous étiez encore le boss de l'Olympique Lyonnais. Nous, on a compris, vous êtes encore le boss de l'Olympique Lyonnais. Merci, John.
No, I'm not the boss. I don't make a single decision right now, other than do I turn on the television?
Au moins le cow-boy alors. Le cow-boy de Lyon, tout
voilà.
Hopefully not. But no, I'm still in ownership, and I'm proud to be an owner.
Merci beaucoup, John, en tout cas.
Rooting Michelle all the best.
Merci en tout
John
cas.
Textor.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci.
Yeah, bye-bye.